In this tutorial, I will be showing how Java developers with a few simple steps can secure the persistent data in their applications using CipherDB. The Java standard for persisting data in a database is known as the Java Persistence API, or JPA for short, and the most popular implementation of this standard is known as Hibernate. If we take a look at the project that just imported, we'll see that at the root we have a pom.xml, which is the standard Maven configuration file. Fairly straightforward. It has a single dependency on Hibernate Entity Manager, and this happens to be the implementation of JPA that Hibernate provides. In addition to the pom.xml at the root, we also have some folders in this project for source, and within that we have test Java classes as well as test resources. The reason we're using the test folders in this case is that this example is implemented entirely as a unit test. The advantage of that is that it's very easy to get the code running because the unit tests are always run as part of the standard Maven build process. In addition to these source folders, we also have a target folder, and within the Maven convention, the target folder is where all of the build artifacts as well as the runtime artifacts for the tests are stored. So if we take a look within the source test Java classes, you'll see we have two classes. First, we have an event entity class, and this entity has an ID, which is the primary key for this particular entity. We also have a title, which is represented as a string, and we have a date. Then we have the test class itself. This class uses the JPA API here for pulling in an entity manager factory. Once we have the entity manager factory, we use that to create instances of entity managers, and we use those entity managers to do things like persist new entities or run queries to retrieve all of the event entities and then print them out to the console. We have one more file as part of the sample code, which is under the test resources folder. This is the persistence.xml, which is the standard configuration file for JPA. I'm going to be switching this out to an on-disk database implementation. So instead of using the mem prefix here, I'm going to be changing this out for a path relative on the file system. And as I said before, the target folder is where we store all of such artifacts. So I'm going to save this first, and then I'm going to run the build process using Maven and just tell it to do the tests, since that is the most important part of this particular project. You'll see that now that it ran the tests, it created the Hibernate configuration. Once that was instantiated, it did 2 inserts for 2 new entities, and then it ran a select, which then pulled out our 2 new rows and printed them to the console. H2 also provides a web application for easy inspection of their database. If you look at my connection string within my downloads, I'm looking at the tutorials folder, the entity manager project within it, the target folder, and then DB1 being the database that the example uses. We use the standard user. You'll see we have an events table that was defined previously. If we run a select on that table, you'll see the data, same as what was printed out by our application. One thing that's of note here is that this title column is stored in the database entirely in the clear. Now, if this title of our events happened to be sensitive data, this would be a bad thing, since any user who has access to the database itself or is able to run some sort of exploit against the database, such as a SQL injection type of exploit, would be able to retrieve this information entirely in the clear. So now we're going to add security to this application so that this sensitive data is no longer available to our attackers. The first step in adding our CipherDB is we're going to open the pom.xml for the project, and below the existing dependency we have, we're going to add our CipherDB dependency. The next step is we're going to provide our configuration for CipherDB. For this, we're going to open the same configuration file we use for the rest of our database configuration, the persistence.xml, and we'll simply add a few properties at the end. These properties will provide the default security settings as well as the app secret used for securing communications with Crypteron. You'll notice that this app secret value right now is a placeholder and requires us to retrieve the actual value for our particular application from our dashboard. So let's log into the dashboard. Pick the application that we're using, and you'll see that the app secret is available on the dashboard. When we show it, we have an option to copy that app secret, which I will do. Then we'll replace the placeholder value in our persistence.xml, and we'll save that. Now there's just one more step that's needed to complete our CipherDB integration. We need to tell CipherDB what data is sensitive and needs to be encrypted. So in this case, we're going to open our event entity, and we said that we're going to have the title be our secure data. So CipherDB provides an annotation for Java that allows you to mark which data should be protected. Once we have that, this piece of data will now be transparently encrypted and decrypted when needed by the application. Let's take a look at the results of running this project using the Maven test goal. As you can see, the application produced pretty much exactly the same results. There was no impact on our application behavior, and that's intentional because this process happens entirely transparent to the user. However, if we connect to the database as we did before, and we select what data is stored in our events table, you'll see that the data for our title is stored much differently than it used to be. This is now encrypted and looks like garbage to anyone who is not using CipherDB. And that is how simple it is to add CipherDB to your application with no custom code required.